All right, hey everyone. So today I'm joined by Andrew Maddock. Andrew Maddock is an engineering manager at Foundry OS. Hello, Andrew. Hey, do you want to go by Andy?
No, yeah, Andy's fine.
Andy's fine. Yeah, I know that's your email address. Yeah, Andy, thanks for joining. Appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I was looking back at my email and I was like, it's been a year somehow since we first got in touch, I think. So yeah, obviously a lot's changed on our side in that year, and I'm presuming a lot on yours. Would you like to start by just telling us a little bit about Foundry and what kinds of problems you're solving at Foundry?
Yeah, yeah, Foundry comes under sort of the 11FS umbrella, and 11FS is kind of mantra really is that digital banking is only kind of 1% finished. So the history of Foundry and 11FS is they've provided consultancy ventures and building out financial service products for banks and other fintechs. And Foundry was the engineering side of that sort of consultancy. And recently we've split, still under the 11FS umbrella, and we are building out our own financial operating system, as we refer to it. And the idea behind that is obviously when you sort of purchase a laptop or computer hardware, you're not thinking about like what hard drive or what certain things are. You just plug and play. You just pull in bits and they kind of work. And that's the kind of idea with the Foundry OS, but obviously for banking services. So we have this concept of capabilities, and these capabilities work independently, and they work on top of certain infrastructure and technologies, and those can be swapped out independently. We kind of sit between those and overall provide these banking services that you can use to build a banking product. And the idea behind that is obviously you can just use the things you need, and you can kind of you can accelerate the process from going from day one to releasing a banking product, rather than having to build it from scratch. You can just pull in the parts you need. So we have these core kind of capabilities, one of which is obviously identity, which is what I've been working on. Pretty much a few weeks after I started, I think we got in touch with Juxton XT, and we're looking at XT, and that was kind of my first, the first part of my work was to look at how we could build out an identity master system for one of the core capabilities that we have at Foundry OS, which is the identity.
Okay, and just to expand on what identity means, because a lot of people just think, oh, it's like OAuth or something. For you and
So
your
yeah, in
clients,
terms of banking,
what is
obviously there's a
identity?
lot of regulatory requirements. So mainly we're talking about IDV, which is identity verification. So people may have heard of KYC, know your customer, or KYB, know your business. So obviously when you're dealing with financial products, you have to know you are dealing with the person who they say they are, and obviously there's a lot of regulatory requirements in terms of um, anti-money laundering, checking in terms of sanctions and terrorism and things like that. So the identity product is really to be used to identify our customers and clients, the relationships between them, what we know about them, and what we've verified them about them in terms of what we refer to as sort of certified facts. And we do that again through IDV partners. And again, the idea is that many fintechs or banks will already have partners that they use, but we've got a core partner that we offer, and we provide those services kind of out the box. But the idea behind that kind of flexibility that Foundry and the capabilities offer is that everything's opened up via an API. Just put an adapter in front of things, and you can interact with whoever you want to interact with, essentially, rather than just like taking someone off the shelf and you're forced down a certain route. It can be tailored to your requirements.
And in that sort of journey with any particular person you're trying to verify the identity of, I'm guessing there's many stages to that potentially as these sort of transactions or engagement you're working with. Like if you're first introduced to someone, you don't want to ask them a million questions about who they are. It's only after they've gone through some steps. So yeah, wondering if you could just tell us a bit more about that data model, or what's complicated in that, and I guess then how that led you to looking at different databases like XT.
Yeah, so again, one of the again, just to hammer it home, the idea behind Foundry is that things are decoupled. So a lot of banks or a lot of products at the moment would kind of merge the process of maybe onboarding and identity verification. But again, in Foundry, we've split them out into individual components. We kind of think when we're thinking about Foundry, we've often got that idea of Lego in our minds. You can take these pieces and then use them to build something, rather than you've got these pre-built massive chunks that you kind of have to wedge in. So yeah, so in terms of verification, one of the partners we're working with now, they have like a pre-process where they kind of take a small amount of detail and then go through a few steps before they kind of do the full kind of ID full verification and onboarding. So for identity verification, obviously the first sort of steps are sort of name, contact details, and a few more details, which we can then use with a partner, KYC partner or KYB partner, to verify. And to do that, we have taken what we refer to as proof points, which is essentially documents like your driving license or passport or bank statements or utility bills, and we can use those against the information you give us to verify the facts that we've received. And then from that, we can certify certain facts, and then we can use that as part of your what we refer to as sort of a digital identity. Again, what we've seen maybe in historically in terms of banking is that everything's quite siloed. So if you take out an online account, a debit account, you'll go through a whole IDV process, give them all of your information, and might think in the future, well, I'm going to get a mortgage with them, or I'm going to take a loan out, and then you've got to go through that whole process again. It's like they don't know who you are, and it's because of these silos between the parts of the business. The kind of idea of Foundry is we have these capabilities that sit across the whole system. So once you've sort of verified your identity, that can be used throughout the Foundry other capabilities within Foundry OS. So yes, so then you can kind of build on those, and it's kind of you have a sort of an identity you can take to various parts of the system and prove and then use it and interact with it.
And
Obviously, yeah. So there's a difference between if you're an individual or a business, you need you need to prove different things. You may have different facts, and we obviously are storing those within an identity, what we refer to as the identity master, and that's where we're using XT as a sort of back-end persistent store.
and just to maybe give some more illustrations of the kinds of facts you're recording, something as simple as someone's name changing, right? That's an assertion you want to make about what their name was, and then maybe what it is now, and then maybe they change their name again, and they get divorced, etc. And I'm guessing a big part of your data model is the tracking of these sorts of facts over time, because everything subject to someone's identity is ultimately able to change.
Exactly, and obviously the documents we're using for those have expiry dates. There'll be various regulations in different countries where we have to sort of recertify at various points. There are facts that obviously, like your date of birth, that doesn't change, whereas your nationality or your name may change over time. That was actually one of the first things I did when I joined Foundry. Was I did a little demo, and we took an imaginary Elizabeth Taylor, and she married over various points of time, and we were able to sort of show using the XT Playground how in a traditional sort of database you would just see obviously the current state of things, but we were able to give a visualization of how the name changed over time. And that's kind of, again, that's sort of the idea behind the identity master. Obviously what constantly thinking around obviously auditing and reporting and these requirements, and what the state of things were maybe in the past, why things took place the way they did because of the state of the system when it happened, rather than the current state now.
Well, it's very ambitious or hopeful to think that someone's date of birth can never change. I've definitely spoken to elderly relatives who have never seen their birth certificate, and they're like, yeah, I'm not sure if my parents are married, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's an interesting field. But yeah, re-reporting is maybe an interesting word to touch on. So let's say you're trying to report about, I don't know, of a population of users who is verified at different levels. And in your previous experiences, when you're running reports against, it doesn't have to be identity data, but any sort of data, how have you typically seen the reporting challenges arise or propagate as people are like, oh, can we just run that report again, but with some corrections or additional data? Like, how have you seen that solved traditionally?
Yeah, so well, some of my background is, I suppose, traditionally we were originally looking at event sourcing certain stuff, so we could rebuild, we could essentially move back and rebuild things over time, and move around in that. But yeah, so for us, that's still something we're considering, and we've having various parts of the. It's certainly in the old system, the legacy system, and parts of the new system. So for us, we're still kind of building out some of those core systems. So some of our asset movement and ledger, where the reporting requirements will come in, are kind of still in flux. But yes, it's definitely some part of what we're looking at. Is obviously we don't want to kind of we don't want to give that kind of current state. We want to know what things were when they were done. So some of that visualization is currently in progress, but I can't say too much on that at the moment. I would say
Well, you're 12 months into the journey of building it on XT, and obviously you've seen it go through the various stages of alpha and beta now. I'd be curious to understand what your impression has been about its stability, what has worked well for you. What are the sort of rough edges you have experienced? To be good just to touch on that.
Yeah. So well, I suppose when I first started, one of the first things we do was mainly doing a few spikes around temporal databases. Our CTO Ewan was aware of quite a large challenger bank in South America that we're using a temporal database. So we looked at various options, including XT. The one we did look at was fairly closure focused. It wasn't the easiest in terms of infrastructure and management, and wasn't the best user experience in terms of development. It was obviously extremely closure focused, and we were moving down the sort of Kotlin JVM route. So we were basically up. XT was kind of up against that, and then we obviously XT was still fairly new. I think you were slowly, obviously, moving away from version 1 into version 2, and it was a fairly early beta or alpha, I think we were on. But the fact that you'd offered the playground really it was really a quick start for us. It wasn't, there wasn't a ton of infrastructure to deploy, or loads of Docker stuff that compose files to set up and stuff. It was kind of like we could immediately hit the ground running, and kind of we're off, like, oh, let's try this out. How would we use this? What can we show to people? Is this going to fit in with the longer term plans? So that was great for us. So very quickly we started to adopt that. And I think there were a couple of I think this was before you kind of gone all in on the sort of the Postgres kind of side. I think there was a driver, I think, more that was kind of not quite closure focused, but we could use in Kotlin. And we started on that, and then I think as you slowly started to transition over to sort of like fully supporting more of the Postgres, it really naturally fitted in with the way we were working. So yeah, we moved obviously over to use that kind of like fully. So there was a few rewrites, but we were, as I say, we were fairly early on. It was fairly quick to do that, and obviously the development experience was quite pleasant and quick and easy. So it was quite quick to move over. And again, not to blow your trumpet too much, but in terms of that we were able to spin up test instances quite quickly. The unit testing was quite quick because you had a test server which we could use. So we purposely built an overly large amount of unit tests using our data, so property-based testing, so we could throw hundreds of thousands of records at XT just to make sure, and we could regression test every time there was a new beta release. And I think that's probably saved us a few times, and we've been able to sort of say, oh, we've noticed this on the new beta release, or we've seen a variation or a change. So that's probably saved us both sides quite a bit of a few headaches. But obviously, when you're starting out on a new product, you want that confidence. You don't want to be worrying that the next release is going to break everything you've done, or and again, in terms of the breaking changes that you guys have offered or put out, they haven't been too dramatic, and they've been fairly easy transitions. So for us, it was just keeping on top. And the other thing is obviously, as you're pushing fairly regular betas, so for us it was keeping up with those. You don't want to be 2 or 3 behind, only to find that you've missed something or it's a bigger jump. So we really kept on top of the upgrades as well, just to stay in line with the shifts that you make, and then we can make on quickly on our side as well.
Well, I really appreciate the feedback, and it's obviously been a bit of a journey for us getting that Postgres API very stable. We hope now that is a rock solid thing. Like, as long as Postgres doesn't have breaking changes, we shouldn't either. Obviously, that we do have some syntax extensions and things that we've added, but broadly speaking, if Postgres supports it, there's a good chance we would either explicitly want to support it or not. And once it is supported, it's good to go. And I know, you've used Kotlin as your application language. There's been a few different approaches we've discussed and you've tried. As I understand it, a lot of your type modeling is done in Kotlin, and then that relieves the pressure of having to put lots of schema knowledge into the database. Be curious to know how you found that journey, and where would you like to see perhaps XT go in terms of helping you with the schema management? How have you found it so far?
So for us, obviously the type safety was kind of important. We didn't want to just throw everything in a massive, we didn't want Mongo basically. We didn't want a massive JSON structure. We kind of wanted to know what we were putting in, and we can pull things out and keep it fairly tight. So I think, well, just to sidestep, one of the things for us, using the Postgres driver was picking a client that really works well with XT. There's quite a few options, either from the Java world or the Kotlin world. So, and it's quite popular ones in Kotlin in terms of like Exposed or SQLite. But what we found with XT, obviously having slightly custom Postgres dialects around the temporal side, and we didn't want to throw a straightforward SQL string in there. So I think some of the biggest challenges for us was just finding a nice client that we could work with and keep access to all of the nice features that XT was giving us. So that was probably one of the bigger challenges. And there's been a few changes, a few new things that have been coming out on the Kotlin side. We're using something called Turple, so we don't get hit by things like SQL injection and we can kind of use that for pulling out type safe models of the data that we put in. So that's probably been one of the bigger challenges for our side. Obviously, it's things like Duke and stuff. You're kind of fixed in terms of the querying. If you stick into standard Postgres, then you're kind of fine. But when you start to say, you're hitting the temporal side, which is not that common on Postgres, we wanted to be able to, we'd nice to sort of work with a DSL, or we looked at working with DSLs, but we were like, actually, it's easier to go raw, like almost raw SQL, because you can just model it and just put in what you need rather than build it up. So so we've been using Turple, which has been quite nice. In terms of modeling, at the moment we've got a pretty simple structure in terms of, and I think you drummed it into us. You can still think of it about Postgres. You can still think of it as a relational database. You can work that way, and then you've got all the benefits of the temporal data. So for us, we're still in the early days, and we've kind of kept it as simple as possible for now. And we're structure-wise and schema-wise, we're not too nested. We do keep a few JSON fields in there, but where we can, we split it out. So it's for us, it's keeping it simple before we get too much into the complicated world of banking and finance and fintechs.
Awesome. So one area which I think you raced ahead of us a little bit on was the Kubernetes and the deployment. So sounds like you had a great sort of introduction to XT, and then you wanted to try and run it on your staging environments. Yeah, how's that been for you, and how have you found that compared to managing other stateful systems if you've done that before?
Again, XT is offering that kind of flexibility where you can containerize it and run it. We were already, we were kind of using Kafka for a broker for messaging, but into system communication and things, and event sourcing. So kind of, it was quite a nice fit. So we were obviously in the cloud, Kubernetes. So yeah, I think the team worked on Helm charts for the setup of that. I think originally XT were offering a kind of, I think you were AWS mainly at first, I think, and then moved into Azure, and then I didn't think we knew we were on GCP at the time. So we started to look at a GCP version. So I think we pushed a few things. And yeah, we kind of, where we can, our kind of ideology is like, we don't want to get too tied into, we're not in the sort of Spring world with the full on frameworks. We're kind of the sort of architect quite likes this kind of bag of libraries approach where you just pull in these independent things where you need them and the right tool for the job. It's kind of like Swiss Army knife, of idea of libraries, rather than that kind of like the monolith, which is the thing we're kind of trying to move away from as Foundry OS, and just break things down into their sort of core components, capabilities. So we were working on Kubernetes, and we put together the few Helm charts and things to work with, and it's obviously, I know, again, talking over time as we do, you've simplified infrastructure on your side. There was a few Kafka topics and things we moved down to one, and then obviously you've got the like a blob store essentially for data storage, sort of the Arrow side of things. So yeah, for us it's been, from what we looked at, the few of the options at the start, it felt like the right decision because it very naturally fits in with the way we work and how we want to deploy things. We're not locked in terms of you've got to use this AWS infrastructure. We expect you to have these queues. It's kind of like it's pretty, you've been pretty flexible on your side in terms of what you kind of deploy to. So that's and then maybe the decision on Kafka is naturally fitted with us anyway. So it's been a fairly straightforward kind of infrastructural deployment, if you will. And obviously early days here, so we were able to throw things in, get them moving quite quick, and then and get them out. And obviously we're quite, where we can, a few of us like to contribute to open source, and I think that's been a great benefit for us in terms of being able to, if you hit a problem, you can dig into what's going on XT side. Some of the changes been made, recent changes, or take a look and see how it's happening under the hood, and then you can kind of figure out on your side where things might be going wrong or what you need to do to make them work.
Well, you're
that's been quite nice.
Privileged position to both be using Kotlin as we are also moving various internals to Kotlin. So yeah, thanks. Shout out to Phil for contributions on that.
Yeah.
It's been nice. So I was wondering if you could maybe just talk about the workload, or at least, you said you've run tests with hundreds of thousands of documents, and for big data people, I'm sure that's like child's play sort of thing. Just throw it all in memory. But it'd be good to understand sort of the number of transactions you're expecting to deal with in time, and like for you, what the value is that XT brings if it's not raw transactional throughput or the fastest possible analytical queries. If you could try and articulate where it is helping.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose for us, when we first looked at it, it's like when you're not, we didn't want to be you'd have to shoot or horn it something in after the fact. So around auditing and management, and also we didn't want to be sort of hamstrung that we have to take this big bang approach where we have to think about everything up front. We've been able to essentially keep it fairly Postgres-y and fairly standard SQL, but start to think about how we can tie in the temporal data and how we might visualize that, how we might customers might want to see it and use it, and what obviously auditing and presentation reporting we can offer. Obviously, we're looking at identity master, and like people change over time, which is why naturally this database fitted. But obviously things like permissions and authorizations and things also change, and you need to know what they were at various points, what they are now, how they've changed, who changed them. So yeah, that was kind of a factor for us. Sorry, just refresh my mind on that question before I go off too much of a tangent.
Well, no, I mean, it's just interesting to hear you talk about it in general. I think the question maybe was more specifically around like the scale at which you have tested it, and
yeah. The identity system it's not really about the number of transactions. It's more about the it will change over time, but it's not going to be millions of transactions. It's not a kind of like that kind of system. What we were looking for more was the auditability and the accountability and the temporal nature of it, rather than the volume. The data isn't, it won't be rapidly changing. It will change, and it can get quite large, obviously dependent on the number of customers and interactions and things. But so it was that we were able to kind of start off small and kind of build on it, and we're not kind of then having to think, oh, how are we going to make all this temple, how are we going to do all this temple stuff afterwards. It's like it's there, but also it's not like you have to day one, right? You need to think about these columns, how are you going to use them. It was kind of like we can start off small and build on it, and kind of get stuff out the door pretty quick and keep iterating. So yeah, in terms of transactions, I suppose I worked in telematics before, and it was data from vehicles. You've got few hundred thousand vehicles, you've got millions and millions of data points. But in terms of identity, it's not that kind of volume. It's just it's a lot smaller, but there's a lot more. It can be bigger changes all at once, and we really need that consistent view from day one until our interactions with a particular individual or party might end. And then and obviously we can look back over time and see how that changed.
Yeah, I think we discussed it on the previous event in the series about how different data has different value, right? You can have lots of you have lots of low value data, or maybe a little bit less high value data, and they're quite different workloads. But one of the things we try to do with XT is make it work well enough for large volumes as well, which is one of the reasons we moved to object storage. But we also hope that simplifies other things like scaling out. And right now you're presumably just running a homogeneous set of XTDB nodes, but obviously you can have transactional nodes and analytical nodes. And has that factored into your architectural thinking so far? Have you been pushing nodes with complex SQL queries yet?
Because it's early days for us, it's not been too much on our radar in the sort of early roadmap. But because we've now started to make plans for various banking partners, so we're quite lucky in that we've kind of immediately gone into the world where we're not it kind of really suits Foundry, because we're not sort of, it's just a retail bank and everything we do is going to be retail focused. It's kind of, we're looking at retail banks, business banking, private wealth. So immediately we've kind of got different requirements across the board, which kind of suits Foundry because that's how we want it to work. We want it to work with many different types of use cases and individuals. So yeah, these different various banking partners will have, the sort of the private wealth side. You're dealing with an extremely small amount of customers, in the tens or hundreds, who are expecting an incredible level of service. So the data volumes are fairly small, but you move over to sort of the retail side and you could have tens, hundreds, thousands of customers. So we need to be able to cater for both. And so we'll be able to tailor deployments and regions and infrastructure around those requirements, as our sort of different banking partners have their various requirements.
And I'm aware you're also using Tiger Beetle for a different part of the stack, right? Not for the identity servers, because there's like a ledger component. So in your minds, where do you see the sort of boundary of where you would use XT? Maybe not just in the identity service today, but beyond in other services Like what would be the the key tick box things that would be like, yes, XT is a good fit in our systems.
Yes. So yeah, to go back to things is like we're looking at the right tool for the job is kind of like the sort of the first principles. What we go to is like, is this a good fit? We were not going to it's easy to shoot just for terms of simplicity of infrastructure and management and operations. It's sometimes easy to just say, well, we'll have that database and we'll throw everything into there and we'll make it work, which you end up with a few more problems. We'll kind of like, well, let's see if this is the right tool, and if it is, then we'll use it. So yeah, things like Tiger Beetle. One of the core capabilities was identity, and we've also looking at asset storage, which is where the ledger fits in with Tiger Beetle. We've got things like asset movement, lending, and various like products. So anywhere we know there's going to be auditing requirements that are all regulatory requirements where it's important to know when things happened and why they happened. The XT is very much on the radar. So I know, and in terms of, I know you want to probably move into this, but in terms of tenancy for us and splitting of data, that's probably where we're starting to look at, and where we're probably going to be having more conversations with you guys. So how we can keep, we can demarcate, and we can make our deployments, and keep basically look at tenancy, and we can make sure the right data is in the right place and not accessible, and split between various customers, partitioned. So I'm probably jumped ahead there, but that's probably something the next steps is where we want to get to, is obviously we'll be looking at that and talking with you.
Well, it's a shame that James is unable to unmute. I know he's doing a bit of childcare at the moment. So, but I think filling in for him, it is an area we're looking at very heavily at the moment for other reasons. Although, yeah, your requirements definitely are going to factor into the prioritization. But yeah, multi-tenancy, or the ability to have more than one logical database within the infrastructure.
Yeah,
being able to join across logical databases, which may actually be stored in different buckets using different logs. That's something we are actively thinking about. So yeah, good time to dive into those requirements, but maybe not on this conversation. And just looking at the time, I appreciate taking your time out of the day. So we probably should wrap up. But is there a sort of concluding thoughts on how you think XT can maybe be approached or thought about for people that aren't familiar with regulated systems? Like a lot of people are maybe naive to the requirements of regulation until they've been burned, until they've gone through the pain of how to do it without the temporality built in. Like what advice would you give to a junior developer who thinks, oh, it's fine, I could just do this in Postgres?
Yeah, so I think in terms of for us, it's always been it's easy to kind of to not put that thought in up front, I think, and for people to kind of think, well, I can keep adding on and building on, and I think that's when these systems evolve like that, that's where you become unstuck, because you get this is where everything kind of this monolith idea it kind of happens. Everything just gets lumped on top, and you're just gonna make it work. You're just gonna make it work. So yeah, when we first looked, it was like we had a clear idea of what we wanted to do, and where things we wanted to be in 6 months, a year, and it's basically we didn't want to cut ourselves off from those options. So it's very easy, to sort of think I can do this another way, or I can split it out, or I'm trying to think, put it into words, but
well, maybe another way of rephrasing the question is, if you face these requirements again tomorrow, but someone said, oh, no, you can't use XT, would you wince at the idea of trying to do this in Postgres yourself?
Absolutely. I think I think trying to manage this, it's easy. At first you think, oh well, it's a fairly straightforward use case. I'll just keep the previous record somewhere else, or it's then when you start to join on top of those, and actually look at the complexity that is involved in keeping that history, and how obviously when it happened, and it's surprisingly complex. Um, so yeah, it's easy. It's easy. It was easier for us to pick a tool and use the experience, obviously, of you guys, and know that the the technology would be able to support it, rather than us have to think of all these. It's You're constantly not trying to reinvent the wheel, I think, as a developer. It's very, the good developers that I've worked with, it's not that they want to, there's a library out there for pretty much everything, and they don't want to recreate that library themselves, because they know they've got stuff to do, and the important is the product, and you need to get things out, and you need to get things done. And my favorite developers are probably the lazier developers, who you pick a tool, and the right tool, and take advantage of it, rather than think, well, and support that tool, and if it needs to grow, they contribute back to it, rather than think, well, I'm just going to redesign everything from scratch. And then you hit all of the problems that everyone else has hit, and you suddenly realize you've opened that kind of worms. That Pandora's box has been opened, and you've now got to deal with it, rather than look at the options and the tools that are out there.
Well, I think that's great.
Yeah, so
It's a great way to
yeah.
summarize it, really, and we're very happy to help you be lazy, however we can, by
Yeah.
making XT.
There's no time of boss.
Well, yeah, and it's efficient in aggregate, right? This is why products exist.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're really, really. It's been a pleasure working with you over the last year, and yeah, I hope collaborations continue for a long time yet. But yeah, in the meantime, good luck with your various launches in the next few months, and yeah, it'll be great to chat again soon. But yeah, thank you very much, Andy, for your time.
Definitely. Cheers, Jeremy.
Cool. See you soon.
Thanks.